There's a ton of really hard role-playing games out there, and we decided to do a roundup. I'm Falcon, and today on gameranx, here's the top 10 most challenging RPGs. Number 10 is Icewind Dale 1 and 2, particularly the first of them. These are tough games as it is kind of the whole way through. A common mistake when you first start Icewind Dale is not realizing you can make a full party of characters and you go in and just get annihilated. This is one of those games that's kind of light on story but heavy on combat, and you'll continually just have to fight and fight and fight. It's one of those games that requires some degree of preparation, and in some respects familiarity with the D&D style rule set. It's also just one of those great games from a legendary era that uses one of the best versions of the Infinity Engine with all that sweet Baldur's Gate 2 3D spell technology incorporated. Now, it's just a good game, but be prepared. Is it the toughest game that's ever existed? No, but it's a challenging game that's more than worth the toil, so to speak. Number 9 is Final Fantasy XII. Now, one of the more unique Final Fantasy 3D titles in that it kind of harkens back more to what we know as Final Fantasy. They don't give you a lot of tutorials, and fact is the battle system is probably one of Final Fantasy's best, most detailed, and therefore open to the most difficult battles. There's almost no hand-holding in this game, and that's pretty much exactly how a lot of people like it. It's been praised through the years for these exact reasons, as a matter of fact. A lot of the bosses end up with weaknesses that are very specific, or strategies that you have to follow, and the game doesn't do anything at all to direct you towards them. You have to figure them out yourself, and forget how easy some of those battles are to die. It's really difficult to 100% this game because of how much extra searching you are going to end up doing, which almost always involves a lot of backtracking. Number 8 is Legend of Grimlock 2. Now, this is one of those games where the game that came before it wasn't really horrifically hard. For whatever reason, it's like they erased the easy mode and added a harder mode on top of the hard mode, and then named them easy, normal, and hard. It just bumped up a level, and it's probably because they were allowed to put a lot more into the second game due to the first one's success. They nearly doubled the size of their development team and had a significantly higher budget, and they just kind of went all out. Given that it is a real-time tile-based dungeon crawler, that they built a number of new features into, such as verticality, as well as a full-blown open world. It wasn't just hard because they made the enemies hard to kill or anything like that, but it was treading ground that this type of game typically doesn't, and it really paid off because people still like this game. It's a couple years old now, and people still rant and rave about it. Number 7 is Final Fantasy Tactics, and if you've ever played this game, you know exactly why it's hard. First off, the fan base was basically used to the regular Final Fantasy battle system, and the more tactical strategy RPG battle system was kind of a shell shock to a lot of people. It's particularly hard in the beginning of the game because you don't really start getting good abilities for a little while, and while you're sort of in the quote-unquote learning stages of the game, it's actually one of the hardest times of the game. It does kind of even itself out after you get a little bit ways in, but it's one of those games that is like, give you all the hard stuff up front, and if you can get past it, I think you'll enjoy the rest of it. Number 6 is Disgaea 5. It's one of those games where when you're low level, you're pretty much nothing. Everything is much stronger than you, and you really don't have a path to get past that other than to beat a bunch of enemies, build experience, and get some skills. What's more, you're kind of allowed to progress a little bit further than really makes sense. You'll start getting much higher damage dealt to you in fairly early areas, but there are consumable items that are going to help you. Number 5 is Pillars of Eternity. Pillars of Eternity has a kind of interesting balance. In order to get to a level where you can easily dispose of a lot of, well, common things in the world, you're going to want to do as many bounties as you can, because if you attempt to progress through the quests, you're going to end up hitting, well, to make a bad joke, a pillar. This isn't one of those games that level scales the enemies, and it's meant to give you more of kind of an experience like the 90s, and it does just that. Number 4 is Bloodborne, a game that makes you take it slow. Granted, it's a little bit faster than the Dark Souls games, and it's a little bit less hard. It takes all of the conventions and sort of streamlines them. That doesn't mean you don't have to make good habits, and if you don't make good habits, you will die. Period. That's the point of the game. You have to make good habits, or you will die. There are tons of traps, lots of enemies that you can't fight if you just think that it's a hack and slash game that you happily jump through every single area just doing whatever. And if you want an introduction to the Dark Souls games, Bloodborne's probably the best one. However, if you haven't played any of those games, it's still monstrously frustrating. Number 3 is Darkest Dungeon, a game that is not afraid to punish you for your mistakes. In fact, it really punishes you more than maybe you might expect it to or think that is fair. It really depends on your perspective in gaming. This game's extremely tactical, and if you don't play it tactically, you die forever. Well, it's not exactly like Dark Souls as far as its style or anything like that. The kind of difficulty it is kind of exactly the same. If you don't learn how to play the game's way, the game is like, not happening. And number 2 is Fire Emblem Fates. The entire 3 games, really. Conquest, Birthright, and Revelation. Which actually has a kind of weird effect. People who played Fire Emblem Awakening kind of developed bad habits for how you're supposed to play this one. You see, the series is difficult, but Awakening is not that difficult. It's easier, and it was meant to introduce more people to the series, so when they came from that game to this game, there were various sort of exploits in Awakening that aren't in this game that caused players to have bad habits. For instance, the AI in Awakening almost never used pairings and didn't really bother with support very much. And if you used support, that essentially made you the king. It's not quite like that in this game. That's not to say it's an unfair game, it's challenging, but if you learn all of the systems and use them how they're intended to, you can get through the game. I think most people should be able to get through the game eventually. It's challenging though. And number 1, we have the Souls game series, Demon Souls, Dark Souls. Let's just flat out say this, these are known as some of the most hard but worth it games out there. They demand you to form specific habits, like I said when I was talking about Bloodborne, avoiding traps, fighting in a specific way, slowly, deliberately, basically fighting in a way that avoids being hit even if you're using a shield because it's going to mess up your entire rhythm. And the rhythm isn't exactly fast, so you don't exactly get a lot of chances, and it has very creative bosses. Now, are the bosses the hardest part? No. The game's level design just goes ahead and uses terrain and enemies in a way that is just very challenging. And more than a few people I know have tried these games and just given up on them. But they're worth it because although they may seem unfair, they actually are pretty fair. If you spend the time, these are games that will satisfy you and make you feel some sense of accomplishment for having beaten, because just learning how to play them is like a puzzle in and of itself. In fact, all of these games are pretty much like that. We didn't pick this list based on what's the hardest out there. If we did that, we'd include games that just flat out aren't fair. We picked games that are fair, games that also have a degree of enjoyment to them, games that are designed with an eventual payoff in mind, and games that a lot of people like. What's your favorite challenging RPG? Can be an action RPG, tactical RPG, traditional JRPG, it doesn't matter. And it doesn't matter if we mentioned it either. We're just big fans of the genre here. We love talking about it, so leave a comment. If you enjoyed this video, please click like, and if you're not subscribed, now would be a great time to do so. We upload brand new videos every single day of the week. As always, we thank you for watching this video. I'm Falcon. You can follow me on Twitter at FalconTheHero. We'll see you next time, right here on gameranx.